She was asleep in row 12, the kind of sleep that comes only when exhaustion finally defeats memory. Her head leaned gently against the cold airplane window. Outside, the sky was endless black, stitched with faint stars. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit in soft blue, designed to calm anxious minds at 35,000 feet. Her breathing was slow, controlled, not careless, but trained. The seatbelt lay loose across her waist, not forgotten, just instinctively adjusted. On her left wrist rested an old leather pilot's watch, scratched, faded, and stubbornly ticking. It wasn't fashionable. It wasn't expensive, but it had survived places most people never see. The plane moved smoothly through the night, engines humming like a distant lullaby. Passengers were wrapped in their own worlds, some scrolling endlessly, some whispering, some praying quietly, some pretending not to fear the thin air separating them from the earth. A baby cried somewhere in the back. Someone coughed. A man snored 2 rows ahead. Row 12 remained still. She dreamed not of clouds or runways, but of silence. Of a promise she once made to herself. Never again. The digital screen above flickered softly. Cruising altitude, 35,000 feet. Everything was normal. Too normal. Then it happened. A sharp crackle cut through the cabin speakers. Not loud, but wrong. The kind of sound that doesn't belong. Passengers looked up instinctively, the way animals do before a storm. Conversations faded. Fingers paused mid-scroll. Even the crying baby went quiet, as if sensing something unseen. The PA system crackled again, this time louder. A breath. A hesitation. Then the voice. "Ladies and gentlemen." The captain's tone was supposed to be calm, reassuring, practiced, but something in his voice betrayed him. It wasn't fear exactly. It was strain, the sound of someone trying very hard not to sound afraid. "We are currently experiencing a situation in the cockpit." A murmur spread across the cabin like ripples in water. Flight attendants froze for half a second, just half, but long enough for the trained eye to notice. One of them gripped the back of a seat slightly tighter than necessary. The captain continued. "Please remain seated. Fasten your seatbelts." A pause. Too long. Then the words no passenger ever expects to hear. Is there any pilot on board?" Silence fell, heavy, unnatural. No dramatic music. No screams. Just shock. A woman's hand flew to her mouth. A man whispered, "Did he just say pilot?" Someone laughed nervously, hoping it was a joke. But no one laughed back. The cabin lights felt suddenly brighter. The air felt thinner. Flight attendants exchanged looks, quick, urgent, professional, and began scanning faces. Not randomly, methodically, row by row. People avoided eye contact. Some shrank into their seats. Some straightened as if hoping confidence alone could save them. Row 12 didn't move. She slept through it all. The captain's voice returned, less controlled now. "I repeat, if there is any qualified pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately." A man in business class half stood, then slowly sat back down, shaking his head. A retired flight engineer whispered something to his wife. A young aviation student stared at his hands, knowing theory wasn't enough. The plane remained steady for now, but something had changed. You could feel it. A subtle shift in gravity, not physical but emotional. Trust was cracking. The hum of the engine seemed louder. Every tiny vibration felt personal. A flight attendant moved closer to row 12, scanning. Then she noticed the watch. Old leather. Aviation style. Worn, not decorative. She slowed. Row 12's passenger stirred slightly, adjusting her head against the window. Her face was calm, marked by faint lines that spoke of discipline, not age. This was not the face of someone unfamiliar with pressure. Still asleep. Another jolt, barely noticeable, but enough. A few gasps echoed. "Is this turbulence?" someone asked. No one answered. The flight attendant leaned closer, uncertainty flickering behind her professional smile. She didn't touch her yet. Something stopped her. Respect, maybe, or instinct. The captain's voice came back one more time. This time, it was quiet, almost pleading. "Please, any pilot. We need help." That was when row 12 shifted. Just slightly. A breath changed rhythm. Fingers twitched. Her eyes did not open yet, but somewhere deep inside her, something old, something buried, stirred awake. The promise cracked. The watch on her wrist ticked louder than before, and the sky outside, vast and unforgiving, waited. The turbulence came without warning. Not the gentle shaking passengers were used to, not the polite bumps pilots warned about. This was sharp, sudden, violent enough to snap people fully awake. The aircraft dropped, just for a second, but long enough to steal the breath from every chest on board. A scream tore through the cabin. Overhead bins rattled. A cup of water flew from a tray table and splashed across a man's lap. Seatbelt signs flashed on like a silent command. In row 12, her eyes opened instantly. No confusion. No panic. Just awareness. Her pupils adjusted fast, scanning without moving her head. The angle of the window. The vibration in the seat. The pitch of the engine sound half a note off. Enough to matter. Enough to be dangerous. The cabin was no longer calm. Whispers had turned into prayers. Phones were clutched tightly now, not for entertainment but for comfort. A child began crying again, louder this time. The captain's voice returned, breaking through the noise. This time, he didn't try to hide it. "Attention all passengers. We are facing a critical situation." Her jaw tightened. Critical wasn't a word captains used lightly. "We have lost." Static swallowed the next word. "We have lost partial control. If there is any pilot on board, we urgently need assistance." The PA cut off. Silence followed. Thick, suffocating silence. She looked down at her wrist. The watch. The second hand moved steadily, faithfully, as it had through storms, combat zones, emergency landings, and one night she had sworn never to remember. Her thumb brushed the cracked glass unconsciously. Not my fight anymore, she told herself. But her body didn't listen. Her breathing had already shifted, slower, deeper. Combat breathing. Automatic. Trained. A flight attendant stumbled slightly as the plane shuddered again. She caught herself on the seat in front of row 12, her hand trembling despite her smile. That's when their eyes met. The flight attendant noticed it immediately, the stillness. Everyone else looked scared. Wide eyes, tense shoulders, rigid fear. This woman looked focused, not brave. Prepared. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said softly, lowering her voice so others wouldn't hear. "Are you feeling okay?" She nodded once. Another jolt hit the aircraft, harder this time. Oxygen masks did not deploy, yet, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. The flight attendant swallowed. "I have to ask you something," she said, "and I need you to answer honestly." The woman in row 12 closed her eyes for a brief moment. Just one. Inside her mind, memories collided, flashing lights, screaming alarms, radio static, hands shaking as she pulled someone from wreckage. A flag folded neatly. A promise whispered through tears. Never again. She opened her eyes. Yes, she said quietly. The flight attendant hesitated. Are you a pilot? For a few seconds, she didn't answer. The silence stretched. The plane dipped again, not enough to drop, but enough to confirm what she already knew. This wasn't turbulence. This was loss of control. Finally, she spoke. Former Air Force, she said. Her voice was calm, steady, unremarkable, and yet it cut through the chaos like a blade. Fighter and transport. 3,200 flight hours. The flight attendant's face drained of color. You're sure? She whispered. The woman nodded. Very. Another violent shake ripped through the cabin. Luggage shifted. Someone shouted a prayer out loud. The flight attendant straightened, training taking over fear. She pressed a hand to her earpiece. Captain, she said, voice tight. We have a qualified pilot in the cabin. A pause. Then, disbelief. Send her, the captain replied immediately. The flight attendant turned back to row 12. Ma'am? We need you in the cockpit. Right now. The woman exhaled slowly. This was the moment she had avoided for years. Her hands moved before her mind could protest. Seatbelt unfastened. Feet planted firmly on the floor. She stood, and the cabin seemed to notice. People watched her without understanding why. She didn't look like a hero. No uniform. No badge. Just a woman in a dark jacket and tired eyes. But the way she walked down the aisle, steady despite the shaking plane, made something shift inside the passengers. Hope fragile but alive. Another jolt slammed the aircraft sideways. A collective scream followed. The woman reached out instinctively, gripping a seatback, adjusting her balance without breaking stride. Muscle memory. The closer she got to the cockpit, the louder the alarms became, piercing, mechanical, merciless. The sound alone told her how bad it was. Very bad. The cockpit door stood ahead, guarded by two terrified flight attendants. One of them was crying silently. She's the pilot, the first attendant said quickly. The door unlocked. As it opened, heat and noise poured out like a living thing. Inside, chaos ruled. The captain sat rigid, hands white-knuckled on the controls. His uniform was soaked with sweat. His eyes darted between instruments flashing red and amber. The co-pilot lay slumped against his seat, oxygen mask crooked, unconscious. Smoke, faint but real, hung in the air. The woman stepped inside and stopped. The cockpit door sealed shut behind her with a heavy metallic click. That sound, final, isolating, cut her off from the cabin, from the prayers, from the fear of 200 strangers, who didn't know her name but were about to trust her with their lives. Inside, the cockpit was chaos. Alarms screamed in overlapping frequencies, each one demanding attention, none willing to wait. Red and amber lights flashed across the instrument panel like warning flares. The aircraft shuddered again, harder this time, and the artificial horizon tilted left, then right, struggling to stay honest. The smell hit her next. Hot electronics. Burnt insulation, ozone. Not good. The captain's hands trembled as he fought the controls. Sweat ran down his temple, soaking into his collar. His breathing was shallow, panicked. The breathing of a man drowning in responsibility. Okay, she said, her voice low but firm. Talk to me. The captain blinked, forcing himself to focus. We lost the autopilot 10 minutes ago. Flight control computers started throwing faults. Then the right engine began fluctuating. We tried to stabilize, but another violent jolt slammed the plane downward. The altitude dropped 100 feet in seconds. She reached out without thinking, bracing herself, her other hand already moving toward the controls. Trim's off, she said immediately. And your nose attitude's too aggressive. Ease it. How do you? I hear it, she replied. The plane is talking. You're just not listening. She slipped into the co-pilot's seat, quickly checking the unconscious man's pulse. Weak, but present. She adjusted his oxygen mask, then focused forward. The instruments told a brutal story. Partial hydraulic failure. Flight control degradation. Unreliable airspeed warnings blinking intermittently. This wasn't one problem. It was a chain reaction. She pulled the headset over her ears, the cockpit noise dimming instantly. Her world narrowed to numbers, angles, and instinct. "Captain," she said, "I need you to breathe. If you panic, the plane panics with you." He swallowed hard and nodded. "Good," she continued. "Now give me manual control." He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. This was his aircraft. His command. Another alarm screamed, louder than the rest. That decided it. He released the controls. "Your plane," he said quietly. She took it. The control column vibrated under her hands, alive, angry, resisting. She adjusted her grip, not fighting it, guiding it instead. Her movements were small, precise, economical. Years fell away. The cockpit changed. Not physically, but emotionally. The chaos softened. The alarms were still there, but now they were information, not noise. She silenced what didn't matter, prioritized what did, and ignored everything else. "Fuel imbalance," she muttered. "Cross-feed valves stuck. We're burning unevenly." She adjusted settings manually, bypassing automated systems that could no longer be trusted. The plane steadied slightly. In the cabin, passengers felt it before they understood it. The wild shaking eased. The screams dulled to whispers. Hope flickered again. In the cockpit, sweat dripped down her spine, but her hands were steady. Her mind raced, calculating margins that barely existed. "How long do we have?" she asked. The captain checked the fuel readings, his voice tight. "At this burn rate, maybe 40 minutes. Less if the engine surges again. Nearest suitable runway?" she asked. 200 miles, he replied. "Bad weather. Strong crosswinds." She nodded slowly. Of course it wouldn't be easy. Another warning blared, a deep, urgent tone. She cursed under her breath. "Electrical bus instability. We're going to start losing displays." As if on cue, one of the screens flickered, then went dark. The cockpit felt smaller now, darker. The captain's voice shook. "We can't land like this." "Yes, we can," she said. "We just can't land perfectly." The plane lurched again, the right wing dipping dangerously. She countered smoothly, adjusting thrust manually, compensating for the failing engine. "Listen to me," she said, glancing at the captain. "This aircraft wants to fly. Our job is to not get in its way." A memory flashed through her mind, a different cockpit, years ago, filled with smoke and screams. A radio call that never came back. A landing she survived. And someone else didn't. Her jaw tightened. Focus. The storm ahead loomed large on the radar. Towering clouds, violent turbulence. Avoiding it wasn't an option. "We're going through," the captain said quietly. She nodded. "Then we go through smart." As the aircraft entered the storm, the turbulence returned with fury. The plane bucked and twisted like a living thing trying to escape. Wind slammed into the fuselage. Rain hammered the windshield so hard it blurred the world beyond. Alarms screamed again. The captain gripped his seat. She didn't. Her hands moved constantly. Tiny corrections, constant adjustments. She anticipated the turbulence instead of reacting to it, riding the air instead of fighting it. "Easy," she whispered, to the plane, to herself, to the ghosts in her memory. A sudden drop sent the aircraft plunging. Loose items flew. The captain shouted. She pulled gently, timing it perfectly, bleeding off speed without stalling. The plane recovered. Barely. Her breathing remained slow, deliberate. 4 seconds in. 4 seconds out. She checked the altimeter. They were losing height faster now. "We're not going to make the original runway," the captain said. She scanned the maps, the weather, the fuel, everything collapsing into a single decision. "There," she said, pointing. "Shorter runway." "Old military strip. That field's barely operational," he protested. "I know," she replied. "I trained there." He stared at her. For the first time since she entered the cockpit, she allowed herself a faint, grim smile. "Trust me." The plane shuddered again, lights flickering as another system failed. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the battle continued, between metal and wind, between failure and will. And in the heart of it all sat a woman who had promised she would never fly again, now fighting the sky itself to keep everyone alive. The runway appeared through the storm like a ghost. Not straight, not welcoming. Just a thin strip of concrete, barely visible between sheets of rain and violent crosswinds. She spotted it before the instruments confirmed it. "There," she said quietly. The captain leaned forward, squinting through the windshield as the wipers struggled against the rain. "I see it." The plane shuddered violently as another gust slammed into the fuselage, pushing them sideways. The right engine coughed, a harsh mechanical choke that made both of them freeze. Then it stabilized. Barely. Fuel gauges blinked red now. Not warnings, statements. Time was gone. "We get one shot," the captain said. She nodded. "One is enough." She adjusted her seat, pulling herself slightly closer to the controls. Her hands, steady despite the chaos, moved with intention. Flaps were deployed carefully, slower than normal. Too fast and the unstable hydraulics might fail completely. Too slow and they'd overshoot the runway. The margin for error was thinner than breath. In the cabin, passengers were silent. Not because they weren't afraid, but because fear had transformed into something deeper. People held hands. Strangers pressed palms together. Mothers whispered promises they weren't sure they could keep. Somewhere in the back, a man closed his eyes and prayed aloud. The aircraft descended through the final layer of clouds. The runway lights flickered, old, uneven, unreliable. Crosswind hit hard from the left, shoving the plane off alignment. The captain instinctively reached for the controls. She stopped him with a single look. "I've got it." She kicked the rudder gently, compensating for the wind. The plane yawed, corrected, resisted, then complied. "Speed?" she asked. "Too fast," the captain replied. "But if we slow any more, we stall," she finished. "I know." Rain hammered the windshield. The runway rushed toward them faster now. 500 feet. 400. A sudden alarm screamed. "Wind's here." The plane dropped. Hard.